Thanks everybody for joining this conversation. We're very happy that you're here. I just want to quickly thank everyone at the Writers Guild Foundation for making this possible and this adventure we call 2020. It's such a great event every year, and I'm so happy it could happen virtually. My name is Lana Link, and I'm the Senior VP at the Moving Picture Institute. We're a production company and talent incubator that promotes projects and makes projects about freedom. For this conversation, we're going to focus in on short films and how they can help lead to future opportunities. Of course, shorts can be a great end into themselves, just a great standalone piece of art. But if you can use them to leverage to the next step of your career, absolutely take advantage. Certainly, our panelists have done this successfully, and we'll share some experiences about that. I'll quickly introduce them all, but you can find out more bio info on the website, which are more in-depth profiles. I'll start with Channing Godfrey Peoples, who made the incredible film Miss Juneteenth. It's fantastic, premiered at Sundance this year, and was made publicly available on Juneteenth, appropriately enough. So absolutely check that out. Thanks for joining us, Channing. Minhal Baig did Hala, which started out as a short, but is now a feature on Apple TV Plus, another phenomenal film that I highly encourage you all to check out. It premiered at Sundance last year and is just a phenomenal story, which she'll tell you how she went from short to feature. And then last, we have the Bragg brothers, Austin and Meredith. They made a short film called A Piece of Cake, which premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival this year and was nominated for Best Short there. And that led to an opportunity to develop a feature with my company, MPI. One last thing before we dive in, I want to mention, if you're interested in making a short, we do run a short film creative production lab, creative development and production lab, where we put out a theme, writers submit pitches based on that. And then if you're selected, you get to go through a screenwriting workshop, directing workshop, you get stipends to do this. And then we acquire several of the projects to become MPI original films with budgets up to 75 grand. So it's a great opportunity, highly recommend it. And you can check out more at npishortfilmlab.com, but just apply by December 1st. That's the deadline. So that's a good segue actually into my first question for everyone, which is, when you started making shorts in your careers, how did you go about doing that? Was it through lab programs? Was it through an MFA, or did you do it completely on your own? And what was your intention when you started making these shorts? What were you trying to accomplish?
When I started working on the short film for Hala, the intention was always to make the feature. So I had written the feature script before I had shot the short film. So I had the feature, and then I just took sort of a very contained plot and put it into the short, and that's what I ended up shooting. And it came out of fundraising on Kickstarter, and sort of getting folks who had just recently graduated from AFI to like help me make it, because I didn't go to film school and I don't have those kinds of relationships. But yeah, it was always, the goal was always like, I'm going to use this short film alongside the feature script to get the feature financed. And I think I got that idea just from watching other filmmakers do that same thing. And Damien Chazelle took I think a section of Whiplash, made the short, and then was able to get his feature financed. So that's sort of that was my process. It was always like very single-minded on making this one specific movie, but then the shorts after that there wasn't necessarily that goal of like, I have to make this short into a longer form project.
Yeah, I'll just say, I mean, as far as Austin and I, we first started with sketches, trying to make each other laugh and our friends laugh, and we got involved with Channel 101 in New York on the East Coast. For those of you, started out in LA, where you make short 5-minute TV shows, and then every month you screen them in front of an audience. And that was an absolute gift to us, because it allowed us to screen our work in front of people and strangers and get real feedback. But once you wanted to, we wanted to scale that up, because the low budget world can be limiting if you're trying to do everything just by yourselves. And, we found the MPI workshop. Actually, Lana knows this. And we developed that script and applied, and we made A Piece of Cake. And that was just one of those films that was going to be too ambitious or expensive for us to do on our own. So we were really happy that we were able to work with you guys to do that. And yeah, I don't know, Austin.
We'd be saying that even if Lana wasn't here.
That is true, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I had I gotten my MFA at USC, and part of the program is they kind of throw you in the water and you have to swim, which means you're making shorts in your first semester. And so I think my shorts journey started there. And I thought it was very helpful for me to be doing that because it really helped me, I think, approach the way that, or I started to approach the way that I wanted to tell stories. There were stories in my head, and shorts gave me the ability to start finding my style and how I wanted to visually interpret those stories in my head. It also gave me a chance to get on my feet and work with actors and also work with the crew, which was a bunch of us film students, jumping on each other's projects, passionately, just helping out. So I think my shorts journey has been absolutely informative for my first feature experience.
That's great. And I think you touched on this a little, Channing, but this is really for everyone as well. When you were making shorts, if you made more than one or two, were you trying to establish a particular tone or style and use it really as calling cards? Like, this is who I am, the themes I want to explore? Or were you trying to wade into a lot of diverse waters of these are very, very different types of shorts, but I'm just going to see if I can pull them off, if I can write in very different styles? What was it that you were trying to achieve there with like a body of shorts work? Was it mostly learning?
I think it was all of the above. I can see now that I didn't know then, but I know now that I was using my shorts as an opportunity to find my style in a way. I think there's one I can remember that I veered so far away, and it didn't work, but that was part of like the experience of finding my style. I went to school and at USC in Los Angeles, and I was still always my work is very, very Southern, but I was still finding a way to make it look like the South in Los Angeles, and I see that now. And that was just a part of the journey of finding a style and, how you want to tell the stories that you're telling, really.
Yeah, I think, I had the experience of like, okay, I made this one short for the purposes of making it a feature, but then it was like, okay, while I'm waiting to see that movie get financed, I'm going to try and make other things. And so we made 2 more shorts before Hala was financed into a feature. And I found those to be very educational in the way that Channing is talking about, and that I was starting to like expand also like a visual language and a vocabulary that I had from the first short, and starting to try things that I didn't necessarily think were going to absolutely work, but I just wanted to see how they would manifest themselves in a short film. So like the second one, it was how can I make a slightly horror story that in a docu style of a young woman that goes missing, where I only have like a couple of actors and we're going to shoot mostly B-roll. So like that's how do I make a short from that? And then, the third one, it was like, okay, this is really going to be 2-3 people. And there was like locations in my head. I always wanted to shoot in a laundromat. And I was like, okay, like, how do I fit that into a story? How do I want this, opening sequence of someone being on the phone and revealing that someone else is also on the phone. And just taking these small things, which I feel very kind of maybe seem arbitrary, but things that I was really excited about seeing how they would work. And I was very surprised that the language that I had set up, and even in the short film, the first short was like, it all still felt like a body of work. Like I remember the editor I'd worked with on the last 2 short films pointed out there are certain things that you do that you're not really even necessarily conscious that you're doing. But when I see these films, I know it's your work. And I was very surprised because they're very different short films, but there is something about, the way that like young people are treated in the films, and like how things are a bit slower and meditative. And I, just thought that was something unique to that short film. And I realized that's also a process and a way of working. Um, but yeah, it was, trying new things. Like, it was like, okay, let me try to do like a horror. Let me try to do like a very contained thing. And there's still things that percolate all the time where I'm like, I just want to go out there and just do that. Like, just try to do something kind of, different, but also still very much mine. And I think that like having a short to do that kind of gives you enough room to like really try and fully realize an idea without like too much money and too much, you get to see and learn from the process, that if you were making like a feature in that space, like you now have like a lot more tools going into that.
I think and correct me if you think I'm overstepping here, Maren, but I think we've always been in the comedy genre, sometimes probably more accurately described as dark comedy. And we always set up from the script first. I mean, even back when we were in elementary school, we were crafting sketches that were, I'm sure, really good. And weirdly, I think most of our productions, especially on the early side, was not so much about finding our style, because that was already kind of baked into us, but that was our film school. We were still learning technique more than anything else, and how to complement our take on things. If we do have a style, I think it's more about a preference to keep the pace up, keep things moving. We don't tend to linger a lot. We have been accused of being very efficient storytellers.
Okay, great. I think that's a good swath of opinions on that. I appreciate it. Minhal, I want to talk more about Hala in particular, and you kind of talked a little about the journey from the short to the feature, but I'm sure a lot of people out there who are interested in creating proof of concepts like you did would love to know more about that particular journey, and how you convince someone that, you already had the feature script, but how do you convince someone that, look, this short really can be expanded into this world, and you want to stay with these characters longer? We'd love to hear more about that.
I mean, if I had the answer to that question, Lana, it's the question everyone asks. Like,
solve all their problems, please.
Yeah, I mean, when I started working on the short, it was like, okay, I want to present a very clear idea of the tone of this film, the world, the characters, and the conflict. But I also want to suggest that there's more, and that we're not getting everything in the short. Otherwise, people will be like, well, why does this need to be anything more than what it is? And so that was the intention behind the short. And then having the feature script written ahead of time was just so that if someone did happen to watch the short and say like, oh, this should be a movie, I'd be like, well, do I have a script for you? Already ready. And that was very deliberate, because I had heard of it being the other way, where you make the short film and there's interest in making it into a feature, and then you have to write the feature afterward. I did it the other way because that was the process that made sense to me. Like, how can I? And I think the reverse is also like, it can be an educational process in making the short and realizing, like, going back to the feature and making changes, which is what I did. After making the short, I looked at the script and saw that there were a lot of things that I no longer needed, or that there were things that the biggest thing was realizing that I needed less. I needed to say less, because more was being communicated in like silence and just the visuals of the movie, and I should trust more in that. And so it was, once I had the short ready, it was, okay, I'm going to try and submit to festivals. We didn't get in anywhere, but we also didn't try very hard. So we submitted to like 4 places, and then we didn't get in. And we just assumed like, okay, well, I'm very impatient. I remembered listening to Mark Duplass's keynote at South by Southwest about how he said like the cavalry wasn't coming. And I was like, oh, it's not coming for me. Like, I have to make my own future, and I'm not going to wait. I think the internet is a better place for this. So I just put it on Vimeo, and then it got staff picked there, and it was on Short of the Week. it was also on Nylon. Somehow I'd convince them like, you should put a narrative short film on Nylon, but they have a big audience of people like going to their website. So after that, it was like, okay, now I have an audience, and I was my own publicist. I was like, all right, we're gonna do like 1 week exclusive on Nylon, 1 week here, and then the last bit is I'm gonna get Vimeo to staff pick this short. And I was about like 2 months of it, and it was like, okay, like just like pushing it out there as much as possible, and then starting every meeting that I had with, well, I have a short film that I want to make into a feature, and here you can watch it online right now. And it skipped the part of like, hey, so I have this short that's at a festival, and here's this password protected link that you're not going to look at probably. So that it took a long time, and I was aided because my feature script got on the blacklist in 2016, I think. I don't even remember. I think it's 2016. And it was in the top 10 scripts. So, and it was, I think it was maybe the only one that was unrepresented, did not have an agent on it, and was an original story, not based on a real historical figure or a book or anything, which made it stand out a little bit because it was kind of unusual. So after it got on the blacklist, that's when there was much more interest coming in, and what is this, and let's read the feature script, and that way, you know, people had sort of engaged with the script, were now being introduced to the short. So it was kind of this process where I was trying to cover all my bases and really try and expedite the process of like getting it out there and having as many people see it as possible and sharing it with as many people as possible, because I feel like that was the only way that I was eventually going to find like the right producers and the financiers. And that process probably took between shooting the short film in 2015, made the blacklist in 2016. In 2017, we found our producers. In 2018, we got our, in 2017, we got our producers and financier, and we shot in the fall. And then we finished editing in 2018, and then it was at Sundance in 2019. So it was a process from start to finish, and I was extremely impatient. It was every step of the way, I was just like, this is taking forever. And it really did like take from start, like by the time the movie was released, which was in late 2019, it almost felt like it was like 5 years. Yeah. So between when I started writing the script and when the movie was released, and I felt like the person who had started writing it was like a much younger woman, and I could see it now in watching the movie. It was a very specific period of my time in my life where it was like, that was absolutely true. But yeah, I think just was being very persistent and trying to package it and making it feel as if the movie was a moving train that you had to get on board, or you would just be left behind and we'd find somebody else. I never wanted to seem desperate. That was something else that Ava DuVernay said in a speech once. I'm forgetting at what venue, but it was like, don't wear the coat of desperation. Was because at first it was like desperate, like I just need someone to help, and then eventually it was like, I'm going to pretend like this is going to be made and you can be a part of this story, or you're not. And if you're not, it's still getting made. And I think that was much more helpful, trying to and making sure like you're doing everything that you can on your own end, that you're prepared. You have your short, you have your feature, you have your lookbook, you have like a creative team in place, and you have a vision for the movie, and it's makeable. It's a makeable film. And it was helped by the fact that I wasn't asking for a very large budget either. So all of these things together, I think, helped it go from short to feature.
Well, I think it's genius that you had the feature script ready to go. And I know that requires a lot more work, but I do think I hear stories oftentimes the other way around, like you mentioned. So I think that's a lot of food for thought for people. And yes, you have to be prepared for the long haul, absolutely, with a 5-year process. But I think it all paid off, as it really is a fantastic film. Channing, I know that your Miss Juneteenth did not begin as a short, but you certainly learned a lot of lessons from the shorts that you made prior to that. Could you tell us a little bit about your journey on that front and how it informed your feature debut?
Yeah, for sure. And I love listening to Minhal's journey because there's there are things that I recognize in listening to you. um, Miss Juneteenth didn't specifically start as a short, but I kind of mentioned earlier that the shorts that I started even early in film school all were, placed in some way in the South. And I feel like I was always trying to work my way back. My thesis film was a film called Red that I came back to the very same community in which I shot Miss Juneteenth to shoot. So it was almost like preparation for Miss Juneteenth in a way, because Miss Juneteenth has this community approach. Like, I shot the film in the community that I grew up in, their folks, their family and friends in the film, that are surrounding the professional actors that are in the center. And so I was always trying to find, Minal mentioned earlier, like finding a language, I think. And I was always trying to, find my language, find the way that I tell things, find the way that I tell the stories, that I had in my heart. So I think my shorts absolutely contributed to it. I also was able to, after having done my thesis in the same community, go back to the same places and say, hey, I want to shoot a film here. My thesis just made me endlessly interested. There's a different bar, I think, in my thesis film, but no. I think the same bar is in my thesis film as well, just for a second. But I was just like, I want to come back here. I want to shoot something bigger here. It gave me the space to create a narrative around that specific bar. And I was just always finding my style. And I think shorts are a place that give you the opportunity to experiment a little bit. And I don't remember, I think I mentioned I strayed away probably once from kind of my style and genre, but I found myself, even in doing that, I learned, I was like, okay, this is what works for me. This is what doesn't. And I think, Minal, you mentioned about instinct as well, that people see commonalities in the work, even if you were doing different things. That's such a big thing, because I think that there are things that we're doing that we don't, even see consciously, but it's subconsciously there, just like in Miss Juneteenth, I knew that I wanted to, tone wise, I knew that I wanted it to be more poetic, I knew that things would be, the film has been called, delicate in some places and subtle, I'm not sure that I knew that it would be that delicate and that subtle, but I was always, going for that and, learning that from my shorts. And, one more thing, I know I keep quoting Minal at this point, but one more thing that I found was, and Minal, your 5-year journey, I have you beat a little bit because I think mine was 7. But it's interesting that you say, you were one person when you started and another person, when you ended, because it's so true. When I started Miss Juneteenth, and I think we have to think about life experiences too. I really wrote it from the perspective of, it's a mother-daughter story, obviously. And my mom was single for much of my life, and a lot of it was inspired by watching her, attempt to navigate her own dreams and raising children. So I really had written it from that perspective in early drafts. And by the end of it, coincidentally, I became a mom myself of a daughter. So that life experience then informed the way that I directed Miss Juneteenth. There was a much more tough love version of the lead character, Turquoise, on paper. And I think, having my daughter and experiencing the intimacy of that bond with another little human being, and also the joy and love I felt for my daughter, it really informed the way that I directed Miss Juneteenth. So, you can find your style in your shorts. It can inform the language and it can inform your visual language as well. But I think life experience absolutely contributes to the filmmaker that you continue to become or evolve into.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely true. Austin and Meredith, I want to combine my question for you with a question from the audience Q&A here. A reminder, if you do have questions, to definitely put that in the Q&A chat box. Bridget mentioned, she says, I wrote a short and all who read it wanted more. and thought it felt more like a feature. So have you experienced that? How do you keep a short? Since you both said that you have been accused of being very efficient with your storytelling, do you have any advice for Bridget, or talk about how you really can keep a story short enough to fit the form?
I think if you have a short and you love it and it feels satisfying at the end, there is a temptation. Every short we've made, people have come and basically said, hey, this can be a feature, this should be a feature. You know, have you thought about making this a feature? And our answer invariably is, look, there are ways, of course we've thought about it, but it feels really good as a short right now, and we don't want to mess that up by expanding it to a point where we no longer can keep the pace up. So we have to be 100% comfortable with the idea that our story is moving, that it's engaging, it's entertaining from start to finish. And so some of our shorts will remain just shorts. I think the way that we have always approached our shorts is to try to find an ending that is surprising but satisfying. And if we don't have that ending, we don't write it. We do a lot of, it's helpful to have a brother, to have a team here, because we do a lot before we put any words on paper. We talk through it and we come up with a lot of bad ideas and we throw them out, but we focus, once we sort of know when we've hit something, and we both, it's just, I don't know how to explain it. We just immediately, both of us, we like, okay, we've got it. Now it's time for us to start writing, but we don't write until we do that point. Even when we used to do 48-hour film festivals, I know other teams would start early writing. We wouldn't start till the next day because we hadn't found it yet, but we regularly were quite successful in it because our story was good. So we waited till we had the right story. So if you have a story that feels like a short, it's a short. Don't try to push it. If you have a story that feels like a feature, great. And I'll put a little bit more Minhal love into this chat here. I mean, the idea of creating the feature and then looking to see if there's a short somewhere in there or some way to give a glimpse into the world, that's great. That's the key, I think. Make sure you have the feature, then figure out if there's a short, and maybe there's not. But if there is, that may be a really good way in.
Great. Well, I'm going to do this again and combine all the audience questions with a question I have for you, Minhal. Tony says that he has a feature screenplay and he's considering making an extended trailer by filming a couple scenes to present along with it. So he's asking for suggestions on how to focus on your story for the short. How do you decide what to tell there? And how long do you make it? Since you had that feature idea already ready to go, how did you decide what should live in the short?
I also saw that Bridget, Oates, and Tony had kind of similar questions, which is like, how do you know what is a short and what do you put in a short? I had a problem because the feature is much more about a mother-daughter relationship, but it was very complicated to put in a short film, because part of the conceit of the feature is that we are seeing, Hala's mother through a very specific lens for much of the movie, and that only starts to shift once some events start to happen. And I felt that I didn't know if I could pull that off in a short. So what I did instead was focus in on this subplot, which is in the feature, make it about that, and keep it very contained. Like that story has an arc to it, but there's the suggestion of the story is sort of about that, but also not. It's about more than that. And we're just seeing, like, in my head, it was like the A story is about her and her family, and the B story is this relationship with this boy. And I'm going to make the audience think that the A story is the story with the boy, and the B story is with the parents, but kind of subvert our expectations of that. This was all very complicated. I feel like there's easier ways to do this. But there's some very hard and fast rules that I was told when I started working on a feature about how film festivals program, and that's about length, like specifically about how you don't want to have your short film over 20 minutes and preferably under 15. And if you can get it to 10, that's like amazing. And less than that, great. And this all feels very arbitrary to me and didn't seem to be irrelevant because our short didn't go to festivals. So it was a little less important in that way. But I think that I really feel like a short should be like an actual short. Like it shouldn't be like you like attempting to stretch a feature length story. Like there really should be like an A story, you know, and no other things going on. I mean, if you can get it in there in the background, like, so, you know, like I was trying to do, suggesting that there's more, that's great. Or leaving the short in a place where you're asked, you've answered a question, and also you have an answer to a question that you've asked at the beginning of the short film, but you've also opened the door to another mystery or another problem. And you want the audience to feel, I like the shorts that leave me unsteady at the end where you're like, oh, I don't feel good about that. And I think that the unsteadiness is like, there's more to explore here. Or a character that's in conflict, they get what they need, but not what they want. And, you know, the feature is going to explore them getting what they want, maybe. I've also, you know, there's like, I think that the short has to be very concise. It's almost, and I compare it, the difference between a short and a feature, in that a short is like an impression, like an impressionistic painting. You don't have time to get into all of the other things, but you can create a very strong impression. And the feature is where you can get into in depth in all the things that you've sort of laid out in a painting. And that's how I would say you to sort of decide like what is, and also sometimes the other way to think about it is like, what is the most interesting on surface level of this film? Like if you could isolate one aspect of it and you're like, this is all anyone will know about this movie potentially, if it never gets made into a feature, this is what they come away with. Present the most exciting and compelling image first. Like for me, it was like, okay, I'm gonna open up on her masturbating, and that's really important to me. And it's like, okay, we're going to present a complicated picture of this person who, you know, has a very reserved exterior, but also like has this thing going on. So just opening with that very powerful image. I think of opening and ending images a lot. Where do you begin and leave your characters? And I think a short is even like more than that. It's like if I was to watch this short on mute, this should be like, I should know what's happening and what's going on, even more so in a short than in a feature, I think. And yeah, I think that answers Tony's question. And how do you keep a short? I just try to, you know, if you're editing, like think about in a short that like you want to keep it moving. I think Austin and Meredith, you talked about that too in your projects. Like I think it's like you should watch it and not be bored while you're editing it. If you're bored while editing it, then you have a problem and you should fix that.
I think that's good advice. I'll also note that your short version of Hala definitely made me feel very uncomfortable at the end. I was just like, oh no, I'm sitting in this unease. So you definitely achieved that. I did want to know what happened next because I was like, oh boy, this is a lot. So everyone should really watch both and see how they changed. I think it's a really helpful comparison. I'm going to jump around a little bit in these questions. I definitely want to tackle a few of these later, but I think first, before I grab how we'll talk about the steps about visibility from the shorts, I think I want to talk a little bit about Imani's question, and Channing, you can kick us off with this one. And Imani asked, for those of you that write and direct, how did you build your confidence while writing and directing your first short? How did you know that you were the person for the job? So you are all writer-directors. So would, you know, since we have a lot of writers obviously here at the Writers Guild Festival, if you are taking a stab at directing, how do you actually make sure that you're that right person? If you should be attaching someone else, talk about that a little.
I mean, it's interesting because I think I have a little bit of a different experience because my first short I made in film school. And so you were in a class in which you were to write and direct your first short.
Yeah.
You generated an idea in order to do that. But, you know, now when I look back on it and you ask, how are you the right person for this specific job? Like I write very specifically. You know, my first short was in keeping, you know, it had kind of a Southern feel to it. You know, it was character based and things like that. It'd be interesting to look back on it now. But, you know, I was really writing what I know. And I think that that's important, you know, at least for me as a writer director. I write what I know. And one of the things that my shorts have helped me define and taught me is how to continue to you know, tell stories in every aspect of the filmmaking, because I'm always trying to layer in stories and shorts. You only get, you know, finite time in order to do that. So I've found ways to, you know, I attempt to build texture and, you know, every aspect of it, the production design, the costumes, the cinematography. You know, I'm always finding ways to include story in little ways. And so I think shorts have been very helpful. But as far as I think confidence, you know, I think taking the first step in order to say, you know, this is something that I you know, I want to do. You know, I would say probably, why not you? You know, if you're writing it and it's something that you want to see out in the world and it's an issue of time, you want to see it move forward quickly, you know, then you do what you have to do to get that story out into the world. So I don't think I ever considered not directing my first short.
That makes sense. I want to actually ask you another question, Channing, that is here on the chat, about linking up with producers for first features, and just really about getting you know, getting financing, actually, you know, attaching that team behind how you actually get the first feature set up. So could you talk a little bit about how you went about that? And then Minhal, if you want to add anything on that front too, that'd be great.
Yeah, it was funny because I was kind of, you know, skimming through the questions in the chat. And I think, you know, someone had a question about the value of film school. For me, you know, there was so much that I got from film school, and I think it's a total individual choice. You know, it was right for me, but it's not right for everyone. You know, I know that there's two camps a lot of times on whether you should or shouldn't. But for me, the most valuable thing that I got from film school was, in addition to my education, was the relationships that I gained. And coincidentally, you know, my creative partner, who also now happens to be my husband, we've continued to work on each other's project. And it was like the most valuable partnership that I got from film school, because what we found was we had taste in common. We didn't always like the same films, you know, but we had, you know, a common taste. And we also, like, we were making films about Black folks in the South. I was from Texas, he was from North Carolina. So, you know, you find partners who you can partner with and you trust to, you know, put your work in front of, and they know who you are. And, you know, they could say, well, you know, here are my notes, and there's a trust factor in them eliciting notes. So that was important for me. So, you know, film school, it's up to the particular person, it's up to the individual, but that was important for me to find that kind of partnership there.
I think the question, I've learned how important it is to find the right producer for your project. I was very lucky that I found people who were graduating out of AFI the same year that I had moved to Los Angeles. And I don't know that I would advise this. In fact, I feel kind of weird saying this now because I feel bad for the people who are paying a lot of tuition to go to AFI. But I went to one of their classes that they would have on, I think it was on Monday nights, which was like global cinema. And they had a professor there who would screen a film and they would talk about it afterwards. So I just went I just went in the back, sat in the back, and I got to meet some of the graduates there, and they're very serious about their work. And I was like, oh, I wish I had this. I wish I had gone to film school to get this. But instead I just became like a hanger-on and eventually recruited those people to work with me on making the short. And when it was time to make the feature, it was, okay, I need to have a producer who I feel like has the right experience and the taste for it, and also is on the same page with me about what the movie is going to look like and feel like, all of that. And there's so much trust that you place in a producer to really shepherd a project, because there's so many things in the process outside of in writing and directing. There's so many things that you don't necessarily know. And so with my first feature, it was very different because, we're, sending it out and trying to get a response. And we got a lot of no's, got so many no's. And it was very disappointing because it was starting to validate something that I know that isn't true, which is that the story isn't worth being told. And I think that eventually we did find, the right producer for it. Jada had watched the short film and really loved it, and said, thought to herself, like, this is something that I want to support. Like, I would want to know what happens next. I want to support this filmmaker. And so that's how that came about. And it was like a once in a million type thing that I don't even know how to tell writers, like, how do you replicate that? I don't know. I think you sort of make sure that your script and your short has like the largest net possible, so that you can maybe get someone with whom it resonates, and responds to it in a deep way, and wants to see it through with you. With the second project that I'm working on, it was a very different experience, where I'm kind of going into it with, there's a group of people that I want to work with now, and I'm going to vet these people to see, like, okay, I'm going to send the script, we're going to have long conversations, and I'm going to keep making them go through the process of, like, is this the right fit for me? Because it's very much like a marriage, and you want to make sure that it's a marriage that you feel really happy about, because, once they're on the project, they're on the project, and you want to feel like they're in the trenches with you. I feel the best when I have a producer on board in the script stage, because I need for them to be there at that time, because my process is writing lots and lots and lots of drafts before. And I'm not the kind of filmmaker where I write one draft and I'm like, all right, I'm ready to make, or I've written a draft that I feel good about, and then I'm bringing on producers at that stage. So I think it depends on how you work, what you're looking for in a producer. Some filmmakers don't want a producer who's very involved in the script stage. Some people want a producer that's really only there for production and post. I mean, it sort of depends on what you want. Really vetting the person's connection to your project, but also to you, because it's deeper than just the project. It's a relationship, and you need to feel that you can really innately trust them. So do the vetting. I even vetted people to work on the short films, which was probably a bit much. But there was like 7 different people that I was like interviewing for a short film that like nobody was making money on. But I think it's important. It really taught me, like, treat the project like this is your project. It's something, that is going to be our project, and you want to make sure that there's a good chemistry there.
I love that. Just to piggyback off that, I agree with it 100%. And that's what my creative partner was. Like, he was in the trenches with me from, early on, even when I was in ideation stage. But at that point, I'm not like, I'm one of those filmmakers who, when I'm in ideation stage, like, just leave me alone and let me do my thing, but when I got the rough draft of it, like, he was the first person that I passed it to. And at the end of the day, and I've said this, I think recently in another talk, he was someone who cared, and you want someone who invests in your work and cares about your work, because I feel like my creative partner, Neil, never tried to change my original inspiration for the film. What he did do was something that I still value to this day. Like, he went through the Sundance Creative Producing Lab with the film. And one of the things that I feel like they stress is, refining the film thematically. And so he was always there, helping to refine the film thematically and stay on theme, even if there was something that needed to change in the script. Is this in keeping with the theme of the film, And I came to really value that, and I came to really trust him in that way. And I think when you're looking for a producer, and, I know people have different motivations. Minhal, I think that you mentioned people have, filmmakers have different ideas for what they want from a producer. I mean, you may want a producer who's, a big flashy producer who can get you in front of a bunch of companies to give you a gazillion dollars. For me, it was more important to have a producer there who supported the heart of my film and was helping me tell the story that I wanted to tell. So, I think when you're looking for producers, that you should, I can't tell you what you should do. I'm big on gray areas. If you've seen my film, you know that. But I encourage, at least for myself, I want a producer there who cares about the film at the end of the day, regardless of, how big they are.
That's great. I do want to make sure before our time runs out here that we talk about any other advice that you have in terms of how the short can help really just with your career and how you made sure that people saw it. So, I mean, Minhal, you already talked a lot about how you really hustled. You were like, okay, we're going to, if it's not a festival darling, we're going to put it on Vimeo. We're going to do all of this. For the Braggs and for Channing, do you have any, additional thoughts about, here's really how you got the short out there? If it was festivals, if it was else, some other path?
I'll say really quickly that in order to kind of get my work out there with Miss Juneteenth, again, my creative partner said, I had conceived of the film, and we conceived of it in a way, it was in the neighborhood that I grew up in, and we were just going to make the film no matter what, And he had this idea that if we applied to different development programs, then we could get more visibility for the film. So that was helpful. We went through like Austin Film Society and Sundance Institute and San Francisco Film, different programs like that. So I urge people to definitely apply to those kind of programs. I know Austin Film Society, supports shorts as well. I also, I should throw this out there, I did a short with Refinery 29 and Level Forward, their Shatterbox anthology series, and those films haven't come out yet because of COVID. That was really, really helpful to me. Minhal talked a little bit earlier about Minhal, I don't want to misquote you, but shorts, feel like that they're less, here's an example, like my script was probably like 20 pages, like the film ended up being 13 minutes. So I'm like, peeling back things all the time, dialogue, and just saying things, with the visuals. And so it was important for me to like be able to do programs like that in order to kind of find a style in which I'm able to say things, in a stronger way visually.
I mean, for us, in terms of any sort of distribution, I think our main focus early on was just to get it in front of an audience, but most importantly, an audience that we could be there for. We had a tendency to do a lot of local festivals just because we knew we would make that drive, or we knew we would get, if we did submit somewhere farther away, we knew that we would get on a plane to do that, because there's no greater teacher than an audience full of strangers, especially with comedy. More than anything else, your family and friends will all be very kind about your work to you, but an audience of strangers is either going to laugh in the right place or they're not. And so for us, I think that was our most important focus early on.
Yeah, obviously 2020 and our current short is mixing that up a little bit. Everything has gone virtual, but one day we will get to see it in front of an audience. And
yes, of course, 2020 has been the big, big question mark for the festival runs. Let's see here. A question that I guess relates still to the producer front is, how many times you typically would meet with a producer? I mean, Minhal, you were doing a lot of interviews, you were trying to find the right person. Jan, you had a different situation, but really before you felt confident moving forward with someone, what kind of questions do you ask to know that someone really is going to be that right fit? How do you know that they're going to have that passion for your project and take it out and really help you develop it creatively?
I mean, I think I just would try and figure out, I mean, it's part of, I think what's hard about knowing whether you're going to be a right fit is you kind of have to work with somebody before you know that, because they could have great references from other directors, but they may have a different process. So everyone has their own way of working, and some ways are more simpatico with others. So I was trying to like express what is my process and what here are the ways in which I like to work. I don't think of myself as rigid, so there's ways in which I can kind of work with other people who have a different way of working than I do. But it was like, here are the things that I like to do and are important to me, and sort of seeing their relationship to the material. And it's really just I had a process of just like asking them, seeing like where I was getting a very good feeling about someone, and then, kind of narrowing it down, continuing to ask like if they were still interested, and like what notes they had for the project, what ideas they had about like creatively. I mean, I like to sort of solicit creative ideas from anyone, even if a PA has an idea, I'm like, okay, cool, like that's awesome. I don't like to have too much hierarchy in that way. I mean, I also think a really big part is like finding a producer who leads with kindness and compassion it's important for me. Just I think it's also just like a question of character, which is a hard question to answer in like an interview. Like, are you a good person? is not something I can ask, but I can sort of figure out, like based on their references, the way they interact with me, interact with people they work with, and try to get suss that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think references are definitely a big thing. The film community is so small, so people have worked with other folks and they kind of know what kind of people other people are. But I think you're right. Like for me, I have to have the experience myself, too, and you kind of don't know until you jump in with people.
Yeah.
There's also like, I've talked about my creative partner who, Neil, who's worked on the project, and but we also had other producers that came onto the project. There was a production company called Sailor Bear, which is David Lowry and his producing partners. And, one of the great benefits of having them on the project were they were from the region and understood the film in some ways regionally, and they had, I was a fan of their films and their taste. So I think that's always something you need to kind of be evaluating as well. Are you all, is this person's taste in keeping with yours? Do they make the same or similar kind of films? Not that you can necessarily see yourself making, but that you see something in, thematically or style wise.
I'll just agree completely on the no jerks rule. That is a very strong rule for Austin and I. And, I think you trust your instinct. If for whatever reason you're getting a bad vibe from someone, that's fine. Like, I don't know that I wouldn't roll the dice and hope that it improves on set, right? Even if that person comes with great references, if it's fine to find someone, keep looking until you find someone that jibes well. We even had with our DP, Adam Lee, for the last short, we had, a great phone call. We felt really strong, but we forced ourselves to talk to more people just to be sure. And then the other thing that we've done, especially for these shorts that we, when we shoot out in LA, when we fly out there, we have a little bit of prep time, and we're getting together with these people socially as often as we can, because I want there to be comfort on the set, especially with comedies. They have to be light, they have to be comfortable, and they need to be comfortable with you, that you know what you're doing and that you're not a jerk too. So I think that's a really big and important step.
Great. Well, we are in our final 5 minutes here. So I want to open it up to all of you, really. Just if you have any last minute advice, things maybe you wish you'd known when you were starting out, or maybe the worst advice you ever had that you would encourage others not to follow, however you want to take it is absolutely fine. But just in these final moments, what would you leave our audience with?
I mean, there was a really good question on here that we didn't get to, but I think it's worth bringing up, which was A79 asked, do you have a day job? How long did it take you to establish a financially sustainable career? And or do you continue to have a day job? Okay, so the first thing is I did have a day job. I was tutoring kids in Koreatown when I was making my short film. I worked at a tech startup, and my day job now is writing in television. And I continue to have a day job because making independent films is really hard. And I recommend having a day job because it helps. It helps with the stress. I think if you want to have a not as stressful time making the movie, because films take anywhere up to 3 to 7 to 10, maybe more years, you're in it for the long haul, that you are financially sustaining yourself and, living your life, because those things are also important.
Oh yeah, I've definitely had plenty of day jobs along along the way. Kind of last thoughts. I think the one thing that I forgot to say about producers as well that jogs my mind was you want to, and I think someone may have said this, but you definitely want to have producer who supports you as a writer director. And I don't mean just in the work, also in life. When I made Miss Juneteenth, I had a pretty newish baby. She turned 1 on set. So there was plenty of times when I was directing that my baby was in the little baby carrier, the Ergo baby. And, that's an unusual circumstance for a lot of folks. So I had producers there who supported, not only my vision, but my ability to do it, as a new mom. So I think that's important. The other bit of advice that I would give folks, even if you're just starting out, is to trust your instincts. And it's something that, as a filmmaker, I'm still continuing to affirm, and grow in confidence in that these are my instincts. This is what I'm choosing now, even if it's not, necessarily the norm. So that's what makes us different and unique and stand out anyway.
That's amazing. I wish everybody had that sort of confidence to be like, I'm bringing my baby on set and this is happening. And I love it. That's incredible.
I was not going to be away from my baby. That's
sure. Inspirational.
Either baby.
That's true. The two children. Austin and Meredith, do you guys have a final thought for us?
Well, I'll second the notion on having day jobs. We both have day jobs that actually allow us to write and shoot and edit on a regular basis, but it's for somebody else. So we're at least keeping our skills sharp on that front while we're working on our side projects. But there's something about financial security and health insurance for your kids that kind of helps as you're trying to do these projects.
Yeah, and I'll just say, as far as other tips, I think there's a lot of people in the chat have been asking about film school. Austin and I did not go to film school, but we did create a lot of projects, and that was huge. But I do think one of the, and I keep seeing people say this in film school, or about film school, that we got from these projects is we created allies and a network of people that we could rely on and work with. And that has just grown with each project. We usually are pulling people from older projects into our projects, or if someone's not available, we'll add someone new to the team and we'll see what happens there. And I mean, it's all an experiment every time you get on set with different groups of people and a different material. But I think finding allies and keeping them close, and hopefully you can rise together.
I think that's great advice. And on that note, I think we're at our 2 p.m. mark. So thank you so much for joining us, all the panelists, and for all of you out there who joined us as well. Definitely check out mpishortfilmlab.com for more info there. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.